So then the next
what's the next run
would be
if I'm getting
threshold,
like
is it?
yeah, I reckon threshold's important to practice, and again there's like lots of work that can be done usually just a little bit below your true threshold. I think then the question comes down to, well, what is your threshold and how do you actually measure that or figure out where that line is? And it's a shifting line. It's always going to be adapting to your training, but that's again where breathing effort can give you a bit of a cue. Once you sort of start breathing quite hard, that's probably when you're approaching that sort of second or that lactate threshold. For me, that's where power as a metric comes to the fore, because it correlates really well with sort of lactate threshold. But really it's sort of finding that edge of it being uncomfortable and then holding it is kind of what threshold feels like. You can feel that kind of panic of, this hurts and I don't want to do it, but it's kind of just okay that I can keep holding on. And I think doing some threshold work is important to sort of build your fitness and ideally lift your threshold, which will ultimately mean that you can run faster, more efficiently. So if your lactate threshold has gone up over the course of a training block, it means your easy running can be done slightly quicker because your capacity is increased. So it's quite a helpful tool, but nobody really enjoys doing it. So if you haven't written that session into your program, you're probably not going to spontaneously go, oh, I'm just going to go out and do some threshold intervals.
It's because they're like hard and prolonged.
Yeah, they suck.
And people say it's meant to be comfy, but it's not comfy.
It's not comfy.
Yeah, what is it like? When we were looking at that book, Dom, I think the way you described threshold was it's like comfortably hard or something like that, and I was like, I don't.
Doesn't really make sense.
It's very difficult to distinguish.
I think it really is that edge before you bail. And finding it, and I think it takes practice. Like your true threshold is probably gonna be, you can probably hold an intensity for longer than you realize if this is the first threshold session you've done ever or for the last 6 months. I think your body needs time to practice running at that effort, and so break it down and start off with like a 3-minute on, 3-minute off, and then increase the number of minutes that you're sort of holding that. I think there's lots of ways to slice it, but usually I want to sort of start to pitch towards like an 8 to 12-minute kind of interval if we're going to do actual threshold intervals. Or I guess more your sort of 5K race pace is kind of another way to get a bit of a feeling for the interval intensity, but it sort of depends how quickly you run 5 and 10K really. Again, it's so subjective, and that's again why I like other metrics like power to dictate that.
That's a good point. I remember when I started running with Dom, and very, very obviously new to running and not knowing all of these sort of different paces. I know it's like almost like you develop that feeling for your own body, like that understanding over time. If you start doing specific work at that pace, you sort of just learn, but it is probably hard to describe, which is where the metrics then come in.
100%. And I think that's a big thing for sort of people that are new to running, is you're not used to what that feels like and how much it can hurt. And how much you actually don't die though. And you need to do that a few times to sort of start pushing the envelope a little bit. And so I think, metrics can be helpful, but in terms of just rough brush strokes, it's pushing to that edge of discomfort that you can still sustain, and then just inching up how long you're holding it for, at that session each week.
I have just a little thought. Threshold, because for example, half marathon pace was meant to be sort of at threshold pace, and it's funny, in training, threshold feels like you wouldn't be able to hold it for that long, anywhere near that long, but there's something about getting in a race that makes it different.
I think in terms of what it again, there's so many different definitions of what threshold actually is, and so what pace you should be holding for a race. For me, I probably come at it a little bit differently, like true lactate threshold. I think sort of half marathon, if you're really well trained for it, but it is probably going to take a couple of years to be at the point where you can truly run a half marathon at threshold. And I think it is a sliding scale. Like, you know, for me, threshold at the moment, given that I've done no speed work for a while, because I'm sort of coming back into training at the moment, you know, my threshold is probably going to be 4:30s, whereas Dom's threshold is going to be considerably quicker than that, and yours too. So
3:26 for Dom, I think.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, when you sort of stack that up in terms of what does that actually look like as kilometers, for me, there's no way 21, 0.1 kilometers at that pace